Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, everybody who's joining us. We are here for the Kickstarter launch party for the Temeraire, the role-playing game Kickstarter. I am Brendan Conway. I am the senior project lead at Magpie Games, and it is my pleasure to be here with the author of the Temeraire series, among many, 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 many things, Naomi Novik.
Hello. I'm super happy to be here and super excited for this game. So excited.
We are all really, really, really thrilled right now. This is both a dream to be able to do this in the first place, and it's going so amazingly just today. We launched an hour and 20 minutes ago. We've already funded. We're already at about 80,000 right now. So the next stretch goal is closing in. It is going to be a special pin. So we are excited about that. But here we're going to just talk a bunch about the game, about the series, and our producer, Diana, is here to help ask questions coming in from you, the viewers. So thank you so much for being here as well, Diana. Thank you for running this.
Yeah, thank you. As always, I'm always pleased to help Magpie with everything they do. I'm pleased to be here with one of my favorite authors, also Naomi Novik. Hello, everybody. I'm a little nervous because, like, yay, how often do you get to chat with your favorite authors? But yes, I am Diana Moon. I use she/her fey pronouns. I am the usual Twitch producer, sometimes GM, sometimes actual player for Magpie Games, and I will be answering questions. If you are asking questions in the Twitch chat, please preface with a Q or question so that we know it's to Naomi or to Brendan. Brendan is the obviously the main designer of the system that we're using for Temeraire. Um, and pretty much any question can go as long as it's technically related to Temeraire with regards to the RPG. Obviously, not everything can be talked about. Brenda will know best regarding that. But I did see a question that is really a great one. Who approached who? How did this collaboration happen?
Do you want to speak about it from your side, Naomi?
Yeah. You know, the thing about sort of ancillary rights is, oh my God, this is how boring can you start with? Well, ancillary rights to intellectual property. Um, Usually, Temeraire has been under a movie option for a really long time, with many different people. It sort of went through a whole long chain, and finally, I got it back. Or, I think in like I'm already forgetting, like sometime in 2025.
Mhm.
And I said, listen, before we go out again, I would really, because look, movies are really hard to make, y'all. They take, it's such a big team. People who really want to do it have life happen. Um, and so uh, essentially I was like, you know what? I really want to do something else with Temeraire that could bring the world alive for people who are big fans of it. And I'm an old school D&D player. I love RPGs, both, tabletop and computer. And I said, what about a tabletop RPG? Could we find a partner to do that? And I just sort of sent that wish into the ether into my agent. And my agent, Cynthia Manson, who I don't know how she found you guys actually. I mean, I'm sure I've been told and it has sailed out of my brain. But I do know she came back to me and said, so there's this team at Magpie Games that have a great idea. They think people can play humans or dragons. And I was just like, what? What? How? And I remember the first conversation I had with the team. I was like, so how's this going to work? And then you guys told me, and I was like, that's brilliant. And I'm like, yes, let's just go. Yeah. So that's what it was from my perspective. It was like, how? And then
Yeah, I mean that meeting will stand out of my mind as well for that exact the nervousness, the anxiety of being like, is our answer going to work? Is our answer going to be good enough? And then having you be like, that sounds great, was like, yes, okay, we're here, we got this. This is so wonderful and exciting. I'd love to maintain some of the mystique and say that the call was put into the ether, the universe resonated, and eventually those vibrations reached us and we felt it in the wind. But I believe it was functionally, as you're saying, like Cynthia connected with our agent, Christy, and then that is what led to our initial conversations. But when we heard about Temeraire, I've been a fan of the series for a long time as well. My dad actually is the one who read it, and like he was a Horatio Hornblower fan, and like he loved all that stuff, and so he gave me those books to read, and then he really loved these books as they were coming out, and so he was giving them to me to read as well, and I could connect with him on that, and it was a great series that I really enjoyed. And when it came through, I was super excited at the idea of being able to do something in this space, to be able to bring these things to life for all of the things that Temeraire does that are so special, ranging from the Austen plus the Napoleonic Warfare to just having the dragons be these interesting, fun, cool characters. So yeah, it was, well, let's just say a match made in the ether. Let's go with that.
Yes, I would agree.
Fantastic. I also apologize in advance. Apparently, they decided to do street work outside, and I live in an old Victorian house with a big bay window that catches all the outside noise.
It's a
Awesome.
gift.
Yeah. This is a question that I definitely am very interested in. And you kind of touched on it already with the supplement that we got to see. If you saw the trailer, we got to see a bit of the South American dragons, which I'm very excited for. From other regions that were less developed in the novels, will they be explored, like the Spanish dragons, Italian, Turkish? Like, how in depth is it? Just going to be like an overall thing, or are we going to have like, like I'll liken it to like urban shadows, like with the city hubs kind of thing.
So one of the problems we always unfortunately run into, even in the wonderful world that we live in today, is that these are still printed on paper, and paper still has weight, and we can't make a book infinitely huge as much as we would like to. The challenge is always trying to figure out what to put in and what, unfortunately, we have to leave out because we just don't have the space. And there's so much to talk about across the board. There's so many places and there's so many dragons. Like, on the one hand, we could go into lots of detail about things that have never shown up, and on the other hand, we want to make sure the things that have shown up and people love are also represented. So this is always a balancing, juggling act. Above and beyond, obviously, at every single level, we want to make sure everything we're doing fits with Naomi's vision, and we want to talk to Naomi and make sure that these, if we're presenting anything even slightly new, it's matching what Naomi wants. So all of it means we're interested in trying any of that stuff, but sorting out exactly what's going to go into the book is one of the major tasks in the ongoing year of production. We're going to be focusing on some of the major things we know have to be in there: Britain and France and China, and then that expansion book is going to have those South American dragons and several of the other places. And we'd love to add still more options. I was super excited that we were able to add this one dragon into the quick start as just one random sort of offshoot new kind of thing. But that level of detail, especially in order to try to bring them out, is challenging to incorporate alongside everything else, because we also have to talk about the overall setting and what's going on in the history, and then we have to talk about all those pesky mechanics and all of those annoying rules that I tend to create. So it's a challenge and a balancing act, but we want to give people everything that they could possibly want.
And I would also say, I do think, even from what I've already seen from the team, that uh, there will be enough, like, sort of around, that if your GM wants to, or you're a GM who wants to play your own campaign and roll your own dragon breeds, you'll have enough sort of material around to kind of triangulate and create your own things, and which is something that I super encourage. Yeah, I haven't really talked about the Spanish dragons. So, let's say you want to run a campaign set earlier in time, right? A campaign set in the age of piracy, right? Uh, or something that's sort of set in like the conquistador era, but in the Incan Empire, right? Like that's an interesting, that could be a really interesting place to situate something. Um, but you don't have the dragons for it. I feel like I encourage people to make up their own their own dragons, and kind of dive in. And once you have enough of a rule set around, I feel like that's something that makes it possible.
I also appreciate that you just invented like two more supplements for us just right now.
Right.
Those sound awesome. Sounds super cool too.
Yeah,
But
I will circle back on what you mentioned, Naomi, as a question, but I do realize for those who are in chat and everything and who will be watching, who were just excited to back it and everything, it's like, yeah, I think Brendan will know this from when we backed another license title. Will this be a Dungeons and Dragons system?
this will not be the Dungeons and Dragons system. So for this, we're using a system we've been building out for new projects. We're calling it the Adana system. And the goal of Adana is to be simple enough on its surface level while still capturing some of the things we really like and appreciate about RPGs. So it has elements where you have to look at the situation. You have to have a little bit of a dialogue back and forth to say, are we all on the same page? Do we all understand what's actually going on right now? But also it has a modularity that lets you increase the depth according to your own tastes. So it'll have like conflict systems so that you could play out an interesting complex battle, but also you could probably resolve that just using the basic system of the entire game, and you don't have to go into the conflict system if you don't want to. And because it makes my terrible little heart dance with joy, it can include conflict systems for things like a ball, where we can have the issue of who do you dance with and who dances better, and can you try to embarrass your partner, or can you try to maybe like flirt with your partner, or how does all that play out? We can express that as a conflict, or you can probably manage that with the basic rules as well. So we want this to be a friendly system. We want this to bring people in because it has these different levels of depth that you can choose to go to. But our focus is also on trying to emphasize the characters themselves, not necessarily representing sort of physics of the world, but representing who these people are. And by people, I mean both the humans and the dragons. So we're including a lot of additional stuff there, such as the duties and desires element in this game, so that we can really play up what do they care about? What are the two warring poles inside of each character where they feel obligated to serve their country, but also they love this other person and they would do anything for them, even maybe if it means betraying their country.
Right. And that's one of the things that I've really loved about the way the system is being used for Temeraire. Obviously I feel like that's what makes the whole concept, right, that I loved with the dragons and humans, people being able to play both kinds of characters and meaningfully integrate them at the table. Um, which, just a straightforward, like if it's just a combat system, you know, I hate to break it to people, but the dragon wins. So a little like um and the duties and desires mechanic in particular, I thought was just so resonant with the core piece of the Temeraire books, the core themes of the Temeraire books, which is that constant struggle between duty and desire. Um, and and that's what sort of engineers so many of the most potent sort of emotional story beats of the series. Um, and and so finding a mechanic in the game that really kind of, I feel like it really encourages you as a player and makes it and facilitates as a player, right? The idea that you're really getting to feel like you're in the books. And as opposed to, for instance, you could imagine a game that's literally just about dragons fighting each other in the air, right? That's sort of like a war game. You could imagine a war, sort of like a traditional Napoleonic war game with like the armies out on a field playing with dragons above. Um, but neither of those, and those could be fun, but neither of those captures the core of the books, which are so deeply focused about character. And to me, I'm more of an RPGer than I am a war gamer. I like the character development. So for me, I love it. I think it's a really great system. And one of the other things, actually, to go back to the earlier question about how we connected, is one of the things when I had my first questions was that Magpie sent me a video of people playing a different game. I've sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the one that you guys sent me, but it was like a video of a gameplay session. And and I thought it was really interesting. But obviously the classic D&D campaign, right? You've got a party in a single place doing all involved in a single sort of like thing, a single encounter, and the I think it's really interesting the way that Magpie lets you break up your party into smaller subgroups that are having, and it feels in a way a little more cinematic, right? Like you imagine that you're seeing action happening in different places, and that makes the story that you can tell collectively much more complex, I feel like.
Yeah, and to be clear from our perspective as well, one of the first things that we did when we were looking at this was like we looked at the Temeraire novels and we said, essentially, if I needed to express these characters, how would I do it? And realizing how perfectly it's there already in the text that you can imagine the both Temeraire and Lawrence have this desire to care for each other, aimed at each other, but like Lawrence has a duty that Temeraire doesn't have to England. Temeraire maybe has a duty to Lawrence, and the instant I can start putting those things together, I can see, oh, this is all just, it's there. We're just trying to bring it out so that it's something that the players can actually touch and play with and be directed at for themselves, for sure. So, yes, like we want the ability then for the larger group to have these conflicting duties and desires so that I can have different relationships with the other characters in the group and say, you and I absolutely agree that we need to do this thing. We two dragons care much more about our captains than we do about this battle. So we kind of don't want to fight this battle right this second because it doesn't look like it's good odds. Let's go. Let's leave. And the captains are like, you can't do that. We have this duty to our country, guys. Come on. And now we have this really interesting, satisfying conflict for four protagonists, for four characters. None of them are clearly right. None of them are clearly wrong. There's just this tension in this moment that's so exciting, especially to see how it plays out. Will the captains convince their dragons? Will the dragons convince the captains? Will the dragons say, whatever, we're going anyway, guys? Like, we're just doing this. We're just going to save you. Think of all the times Timur is like, next time I'm just going to eat that guy. Like,
Yep. Yeah, and I feel like that's a big part of what makes the books fun. Um, and I think that's part of what's going to make this game really fun.
yeah.
Yeah. To expand, like, yeah, I really loved the duties and desires. People in the Magpie community know I love another game that is set in the Regency era, which is more based on Jane Austen stuff, where it's a lot about duties and desires. So it was really happy to see this because, yeah, especially the first book, where we have it's we as the players are as the readers are entering in this world along with the main character who is like, oh no, I have this duty to take care of this dragon, and but my desires now have to go away, and now I have to learn this whole new society of things, and it's so fun, and it was fun to read that, and then now we get to play that. And for those of you who were able to watch the actual play that we did about a month-ish ago, I think it was, of showcasing Temeraire, we got to play with that. Like, what is your duty and your desire with your dragon, with the navy, with the court, with the country, and like where is the balance? And I think like the teaser we get in the quick starter, which everybody can download right now if you're interested, um is the fact that like we can play with that. Someone did ask a question, because this is a new system as a Donna system. Also, can you, Brendan, I know you've mentioned it before, where did the name come from, and do you believe that this would be a good system for starter GMs, for people who just know the games, who just know the books, I mean, and really want to play and run it? Because someone has to be that GM, just
Of course,
get
yeah.
everybody to play.
So the name, just to hit that real quick, we went through so many drafts of different names to try things that were available, but things that would be distinctive and things that could sound good. And it kind of came from the Ice Dana like the people of the art in Irish, and I saw a little bit that it was like sometimes that was a term that could have been used for the Tuatha De Danann as like the gods defined by their arts and their craft, their ability to make things. But also it's just this cultural element of the people who told stories and crafted stories, and the Philly of Ireland are sort of tied into that tradition. So I kind of took that, chopped out the S, made it into the special character, and voila, we have a name. It was both distinctive and it kind of matched our sense that that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create these storytelling sort of systems. In terms of whether it's appropriate for a new GM, I would say yes, absolutely. We want this to be friendly to everybody. And the key to that, to say it front, and it's the kind of advice I'm definitely going to want to put in the book, uh, don't try to swallow the whole pill at once, especially if you're new. Focus on the things that you like, play to the level that you feel comfortable with. You don't need to delve into the complex battle system right out of the gate. You can focus on just the simple roles that are pretty easy. The baseline system of the game is designed to be pretty clear and functional and simple and easy to use so you can get into play quickly. The tools are there so that you can then blow up and expand the parts that you're really interested in. So there are some pieces like you can't remove duties and desires, they always have to be there, but there are lots of pieces that you can just sort of push to the side for the start until you are more comfortable playing it, and then you can bring it in. What's more, the good news in a setting like this is that a lot of the time you're going to be playing members of a military unit. So it solves a lot of the questions that tend to come up in RPGs of why would we even do this? What are we even doing? Where are we? And who are we? And what are we doing? The answer is a guy shows up and gives you orders, and now you do that. That's the thing you're supposed to do. In the
I mean, the
grand scheme
dragons
of
will
the game.
still ask that.
Well, of course, the dragons will ask that, and then the captain will be like, "We have these orders. We gotta do this thing." In the grand scheme, we want to encompass more variety of structure, but especially if you're just starting out, it's a super familiar and structured setting that you can use to just be like, "We serve this nation. We got these orders. We're going on this mission. Eventually, we might refuse orders. We might be told to do something we absolutely won't do." But that's down the line. For now, it's a pretty clear structure. We're going to go to the place we're told to go, and we're going to do the thing that we're told to do, and we're going to encounter whatever challenges we encounter along the way.
Yeah, and I do think, in fact, that is often overlooked as such a huge challenge, even for experienced GMs, but especially for a new GM, where everybody's created their own character and every player is invested in their own character, and you want them to be. But then you, as the GM, are like, what was it? I feel like I saw a post on Tumblr the other day that was just like, there's a party and like there's a lady dragon, like a purple tiefling and a sentient gelatinous cube. And it's like, and then like, it's like, why is there a gelatinous cube in the tavern? And they all just met at a tavern. You're like, and as a GM, that's a real problem. Like, why is the sentient gelatinous cube in um, and that was also one of the things that I thought was really great when you guys first told me about it, which was the mechanic of using formations,
Hmm.
right? Of leading into the idea that the formation structure is like this encapsulating, it's like a bag, right? Into which all the characters, and you can have a huge variety of characters in the bag, but they've all got to be in the bag somehow. And
Hmm.
that is really effective because a formation, even if it's not, it doesn't have to be literally like a British Army formation, right? Like Arcady and the dragons and the feral dragons, you could think of them as a formation, right? But they have like there's an idea here that there's a group here that
Hmm.
um, everybody's invested in being a part of, and is not something that you're just going to like leave because you had a fight with somebody else in the group. You're all kind of stuck together. Um, and for a GM, I think that gives you a lot of power. Like if your players get stuck in sort of a thing where everybody's kind of getting bored, it's easy for you. Like suddenly a courier arrives with brand new orders,
Hmm.
or suddenly your formation is like, one of your scouts comes back and like, hey, you've just been cut off and you're about to be ambushed. run for it, or literally you are ambushed, right? Um, Sorry, I mentioned I'm actually feeling fine, but I'm in that stage of like the post-cold area where I'm like I sound absolutely horrible. And I'm like, you know, triple fisting mugs of things. But that's why I'm coughing. Um, but yeah, but so I feel like I think it actually is a really friendly system.
Well, and one of the things that actually that assists with is you can have characters who might not choose to hang out, who are forced into the same group. So it's the gelatinous cube. It's the gelatinous cube, tavern problem, but it's even more than that. You and I could both create characters who massively disagree on something important, but we're both part of the same formation. And that disagreement is not going to just inherently sunder our entire game and just break our story, because now we're forced into close contact, and that creates interesting friction as we push and pull. And maybe eventually one of us can successfully change the other's mind. Maybe they can't. But either way, we're playing to see what happens, and our characters can have an arc as they arrive in conflict with each other. If we're all perfectly simpatico and we agree on everything from the jump, that makes us a strong unit, but it means all the pressure has to come from outside to create any of that narrative tension. Having these protagonists that we want to watch who have their own tension between each other means that we can circle back on the main characters of the story, and a formation structure, especially the sort of military structure that says, like, you didn't choose to be here, but you can't choose not to be here, gives us that gift. And if I can interject with one of my questions, because it came up sort of on the last uh, question that we talked about, but it's tied to this idea of like characters who can disagree. One of the things that I find interesting, and especially hearing you talk in some of the interviews, it's like Lawrence holds beliefs that are not correct, or that are him imposing some order that he believes is true upon the universe, but they are messy or prejudiced or broken, and he's confronted with those truths all the time, and he does evolve over the course of the series. But one of the challenges that it occurs to me, and that's valuable for people to hold, especially when you're envisioning a character in this setting, how do you create a character who simultaneously holds a belief that is messy and problematic and yet is still likable? Like what was in your head, Naomi, for doing that for Lawrence?
So, you know, one of the key pieces, right, is that for me, and one of the fun things as a writer, right, is, but that also worked in terms of bringing the reader into the universe, is that I wanted Lawrence to really be a man of his time, a historical naval officer, a member of the British aristocracy, with, and if you read like first person accounts, journals, people from the time, it's like, yeah, we look back at those thoughts and we're like, what? I remember, in particular, I well, and obviously you remember that many of these things which were published were written for what they thought their audience wanted to read. So I read this travel journal of someone who was part of one of the diplomatic missions to China. Um, and this guy, literally, like, it's just sort of nonstop. He could not have had a worse time in China. The guy literally sailed across the entire planet on a wooden boat, got to someplace else, and literally could not enjoy a single thing. As you could, like everything was to be sneered at, everything was like to be disparaged. Um, and you're reading this and you're like, what did you ever get on a boat for? What are you doing? Why
What an
why did
idiot.
you ever
Yeah.
leave home? Um, you know, and uh and as somebody who myself loves to travel, loves to experience new cultures, um, it's a little bit like, but to create a believable historical character, right? You have to put yourself in the mindset of somebody in their time, and really kind of eh, respect, who they would be and where they would be coming from. And and then to make them somebody that, you today would like to spend time with. To me, the fundamental core that makes Lawrence likable is that he's not a hypocrite, right? When he's like sitting there being like, "Oh God, I have to stop being a naval officer and join the aviators and give up like my happy life." That's not like, "Oh, woe is me." I mean, we as the reader are like, "Woo, dragon, you get to fly on a dragon." That's but um Lawrence really does experience that as a loss, and he's he's still going to do it, right? Lawrence has all these assumptions, but
Right.
underlying them is a true sense of sort of honor and justice, right? And also the other piece is Lawrence is actually fairly religious, you know, and
Hmm.
but not in a hypocritical way. He's the kind of religious where it's like it's more about what he's got to do, right?
Hmm.
Um, and in general, like the systems that he endorses, that he approves of, are not systems, is not like for thee, but not for me. It's the other way. It's like for me first, and
Hmm.
that is something where I think it makes him a character you can respect even when you're completely disagreeing with him.
Mm.
That he's walking his walk. And you may not like his walk, but he's walking it. And that also fundamentally, he is actually open to
Hmm.
change, and that ultimately and that finally that core of him, that sort of that sense of justice and morality, right, supersedes, sorry,
No, sorry to make you talk so much.
um,
It's so interesting.
it goes beyond um to the point where he actually, sorry, this is going to be a giant spoiler. There's no way around it. When he decides to commit treason,
Hmm.
the person he is at the start of book one would never have thought of it.
Right.
Um, but it's not that he's become a different person. In book four, the core parts of him are the same,
Right.
just accumulated. He has been taken out of his comfort
Yep.
zone where everything is sort of designed to keep him comfortable and complacent. Um, and in a certain sense, that system, right? Like, so the Age of Sail, as a sea captain, he's literally like this one guy telling this entire ship of hundreds of people crammed into like hammocks all together, like what they're supposed to be doing. And they're all being paid in like, minuscule things. Some of them have literally been kidnapped,
Hmm.
forced into service. Um, the system, right? This idea, um, if you didn't actually if you didn't sort of like buy into your system, that you have some actual right to tell all these people what to do,
Right.
um, it would break down, and then your country would lose the war, and and everybody would lose everything. So, that's kind of what I think about that systems tend to serve at least some of the people in them. Um, and and when you're in a system, it's hard to see it. Um,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and I especially like I love the idea that a key component is we don't have to like what he wants, but we need to respect him and how like we see his adherence to those some of those elements of the system as like, yeah, he is consistent. He is honorable to himself and what he believes, and that's a key thing that we want to keep for the characters. You don't necessarily have to love what your character is doing, but you have to be able to respect the character to be able to invest in them. And I mean, another piece as you were talking about it that occurs to me is that, of course, this is exactly the perfect example of that friction producing, because part of the answer to the friction of how we like him is Temeraire exists. And we like Temeraire, and Temeraire is invested in Lawrence, and Temeraire is pushing back on Lawrence. Temeraire is a source of much of that change. So we can also respect Lawrence because we respect Temeraire. I'm thinking of like I was rereading it recently, and so it's one of the funny lines that stuck with me where Temeraire was like, he can't show respect to anybody who hasn't read the Analects, and then accepting Lawrence, of course, because Lawrence hasn't read the Analects, but he's fine. He's fine. Moving on. And so we have these moments that let us invest in Lawrence as well through the lens of a Temeraire invested in Lawrence. But we always have this sense that like there are things about Lawrence that are absolutely respectable and respect worthy, regardless of whether we're a fan of Lawrence's prejudices and how they can mislead him sometimes. Sorry to seize the question. That was
No,
super interesting.
the other piece also is, by the way, I add this that, a character does not need to be a good person to be a satisfying character
Yeah.
to interact with, right?
Hmm.
Um, Unrepentant assholes. You know, there has to be something, if it's somebody who's just like grotesquely unpleasant, right? No. But there are plenty of people and there are plenty of characters, like think about Arcady. Arcady's like, I'm
Yeah.
out for me. I don't care, right? But
Yeah.
it's still fun, right? Iskierka
Right.
is,
That's
like, Iskierka's like, I'm doing what I want to do. I do what I want, right? And that kind of character obviously in moderation can be really fun, both to play and to watch. Um, and yeah, there's so many characters, characters do not need to be good people to be
right.
fun.
Great answer.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think people kind of forget that with RPGs, it's like obviously doing it in a safe way is to explore the gray morality of things, of not just the people but the systems and everything. Like and war, obviously. Um, part related to that, and I'm trying to find where, because we have a lot of lovely questions that hopefully we'll get to all of them. We might not be able to, but we will definitely try. Kind of we talked about it like at the top a bit, like one of the main reasons like you chose Magpie is like, oh, playable dragons. Like, was that always in your head that you wanted like a game to have the playable dragons? Like, um do you think
I
the
would say,
success wouldn't have been as good if it was just the humans, for example, and the dragons were like NPCs?
uh, yeah, so I when I was thinking about it, right, I didn't have a super preconceived notion. I did think that that was going to have to be the challenge of, are you doing humans or are you doing dragons? And that's why when they were like both, I was like, it's like that meme of like the but how? Um, right. And uh just because, I was sort of locked a little bit in that mindset of, you have to have this system um, that can encompass combat, right? Um, and I was locked into that mindset of like, you've got this one party doing one thing. Um, and so I would say, in terms of, I felt like one of the key things about Temeraire, right, is that the dragons are people. They're not humans, but they are people, um, with their own preoccupations, their own motivations. So obviously one of the antecedents, one of the big inspirations for Temeraire is the Pern books by Anne McCaffrey. But one of the things about there is that the dragon rider bond is sort of like a permanent psychic bond that can't actually be dissolved without, serious trauma, at least to the abandoned party, and possibly like literally death. Um, and the dragons like they're not like not they don't it's not that they have no personality or that they don't have thoughts or they're not sentient, but they're very much like background behind the people and their dramas. And that's not the case in Temeraire, right? For instance, like to me, the pleasure of the relationship between Lawrence and Temeraire is that um, there's a choice on both sides. It would be a very brutally hard choice to make, right? Like, both Lawrence and Temeraire could not make the choice to sever that connection without deep, deep pain. But it's a possibility. It's not like it's like it's physically impossible to break the bond. Um, and that is what creates a kind of push and pull between. And so the dragons having their own motivations, their own personalities, um, is and therefore feeling like they should be characters in a game was really key to me. And again, that's why it was literally like when Magpie was like, here's what we want to do. Yes, right.
We have team members here who would have fought tooth and claw to make dragons characters if we ever had considered it otherwise. Because definitely like the love for Temeraire, the wanting to be Temeraire or play a Temeraire kind of character was always a huge component of it. So yes, it's gratifying to hear that. And yes, for us, it was always like that acknowledgement that they were characters. They go on their own journeys. They learn their own things. Like it's these subtle moments that are really great in retrospect. I say subtle, I don't know, maybe I go back and forth on how subtle it is, but one of the things that I love is just simplistically that Temeraire leaves China to go back with Lawrence, because to me, that is like he found a place, he loved the place, he was happy in the place suited him, and he chose his person over that. And it's not a psychic bond, it is a choice, a sacrifice, and a cost he's paying for a number of reasons, up to and including that he wants to change Britain. But like that's such a fantastic, beautiful moment that is for a character, and we needed the ability to have those kinds of moments happen for the dragons for sure.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I love that. With regards to the RPG specifically, how are you going to approach the understanding about dragons? Because obviously in the book series, we had the narrow view with Lawrence and the British Empire and what they think dragons should be, and then yeah, the whole like uh culture shock of how China worked with it. So how are you going to like broaden that also? Sorry, brain just went whoop. It's still early for me at least. Um and relatedly, will we get to have the dragons? I mentioned this to you earlier, Brendan. Get to have more roles like in China, that they got to be able to be more than just, military and such.
Sure. So for the first part, expanding it to different cultures and cultural mores and the ways that different societies see dragons, we absolutely want to cover that, include that. That goes back to the thing I said before of just the challenge is always how do we fit everything in and how do we allocate pages so that we cover as many bases as we can, knowing that also, as Naomi said, there's an element where you could likely extrapolate or build upon some of the stuff that we say in the first place. And we're going to be doing our best to reflect what's already in the books, coupled with talking to Naomi to see if there's anything new that we need to talk about or iron out. But the key is that, yeah, we want to make sure these different places that you could go to, the different ways that they see things are represented. There's a reason why one of the primary stats in the game is about etiquette and like it's about how do you present yourself. And yes, one of the challenging things that we're going to have to talk about is that etiquette absolutely changes based on where you are. You might be really, really, really comfortable and well suited to your home environment and then go somewhere else and have no idea how to act. And we want to draw attention to characters who are, I would almost say, like fluid or chameleonic, who are capable of quickly fitting in and figuring out, aha, I see, I get it. I notice the behaviors, I know what I'm supposed to do, I can feel it in the moment. I can sort of play it by ear and figure this out. And characters who are just like, what? What's the rules? I don't what am I supposed to do? And that covers humans and dragons for sure. That we want there to be this distinction of in some places dragons are brought in and in some places dragons are viewed entirely differently. In some places dragons are in charge. And we need to cover all of those spectrums, especially to make those places available for you to visit. And a similar note with regard to dragons occupying different roles, the key thing is this formation structure. So you are going to be part of a formation. The emphasis is still ultimately sort of surrounding the Napoleonic Wars for this game. So what that means is we still just need to come up with some way that you're a part of that formation, that you're journeying with this group, or that you're doing stuff with this group. So somebody who, like a dragon who'd stay at home and count the beans and do perfect accounting, maybe not, unless we can make that make sense. And now you're a quartermaster for your formation. And we're like, aha, okay, actually, that's great. Now you're journeying with your formation and you're keeping track of all of their equipment and materials and logistics. And it's interesting that that's a dragon in that role now. How does that look? How does that feel? How does everybody respond to that?
A dragon would make a great quartermaster.
Yeah.
And also, I think that dragon, nobody would realize, but that dragon would end up like in charge of the formation because all of the other dragons would be like, oh, you're in charge of all the supply. Um, you know, that's a
Love
really
it.
important dragon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you heard it here. We're going to create the quartermaster position. We're going to make sure it's really high status for the dragons. But yeah, like we just, as long as we can answer the question of how does this fit into the formation, that's the key thing. If we can't really figure out how some of those roles would fit the formation, we're probably going to leave them out just by virtue of needing a focus to make everything fit together. But there's a lot of versatility there. Like you
Right.
could always easily play the character who never wanted to be part of a formation, never wanted to do this at all, not even a Lawrence, who's a naval officer, somebody who has absolutely no connection to any of this, and they got thrown into it for whatever reason.
What
Like it's
about
still possible.
feral dragons? Are we gonna have a chance to like interact or be like play as a feral dragon who gets thrusted into combat for what have you?
Definitely. Again, like as long as we can make it fit in the formation,
Mhm.
that makes sense. And that's a target we absolutely want to include that capacity because we have Arcady, we have these examples of a formation of feral dragons. And again, we have a number of people I think on staff who would fight tooth and claw to make absolutely sure that they were included.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
feral dragons are actually pretty, it's like you make once if you've got people in your formation who can make that leap to, like you can actually negotiate with dragons, right? Um, then it's pretty simple. It's like, hey, you want to help us out? Look at this beautiful cow. All you
Yep.
right? Join our formation. Cows all the time. Like, oh yeah, right.
Right.
I
Um,
actually played a game inspired by Temeraire. It was a hack a long time ago, and one of the dragon mating because we played as dragons. One of the mating rituals or the flirtation courting was like, I stole a cow for you. Would you like to come with me to see it? So yeah, that's awesome. Also,
good.
think,
That's a good moves on that dragon, right?
yeah, exactly. Um,
The dragon's a player.
yeah. I also like, and if anybody's seen the quick start, there's this lovely picture of a dragon like peering their head in as two humans are courting, and I'm just like, I want a dragon matchmaker is what I really want now.
Um,
just, yeah,
Dragons are 100% the worst Yentas in the entire world. They'll absolutely be like, and now kiss.
and they can force them too. It's just like it's the opposite of that from what was it, Rapunzel with the little like. But yeah, excellent. I also want to mention we've hit the 100,000 stretch goal, $100,000 in what, a couple of years, or not a couple of years, a couple hours. Sorry, right.
Yep.
So woo, we're so happy for that. Thank you everybody for supporting. Obviously
so much.
this campaign is going to be going for quite a long time. So we have all the chances to get all that in.
But just in case anybody's watching, I want to make sure everybody knows that there is a special reward if you back in these first 60 hours. There is a cloth map of Europe that looks pretty cool. So
yeah,
there's plenty of time. Do what you're comfortable with. But if you do back now, you get this awesome map added to your pledge.
And if you're a first-time Kickstarter, you do not get charged immediately. You get charged at the end of the campaign. And I noticed for this campaign, you can choose if your credit's good or if you're pay monthly option. Kickstarter randomly will offer that. That is an option because that captain and admiral tier is very,
So
very.
much cool
I'm
stuff.
looking at it so much. Um, but yes, relatedly to what I mentioned with the artwork, I someone had asked like how many artists are on there. I know in the quick start there was a credits for multiple artists. So Magpie is lovely in that they use multiple artists to get different styles and designs. But relatedly to that, Naomi, how much input did you have in the art direction, or would you
I
just
mean,
like?
yeah, they've been amazing about consulting me the whole way through. And I hope I haven't been too annoying. You know, but it's, one of the huge pleasures of something like this as an author is that, getting to see the team's vision, right? And having them put together a lot of these, because a lot of these scenes are of the Temeraire universe in ways that expand it beyond, like the covers that I've seen, right? And Yeah, so it's been really cool. And so much of the art is just unbelievable. Like, yeah, just great stuff like that. The image of the Incan Empress
Yeah.
um, is just amazing. And that was one of those things where Marissa, the art director, had actually previously worked on another game where they'd done a lot of research into historical Incan costume. And she was able to bring that into into that art. And I was just like blown away.
With
Yeah,
oh, go ahead,
I
sorry.
just want to say, like, just to make sure we call that out, Marissa Kelly is the art director. She's incredible. She's been working with Naomi. I know that she really appreciates all of Naomi's feedback. Like, it's always this back and forth challenging collaboration, but the challenge ultimately leads to something productive as everybody's comments refine it because everybody wants to be great. And like for me, sitting on the sidelines entirely, where I'm not even participating exactly. Every now and then I'm shown something, but like Naomi's chiming in with notes and Marissa's producing notes and going back to the artist, and I'm like, this is all great. This is just exciting. I just get to sit here.
Exactly. It's always fun to see art created of your stuff. Um with like having all the input with the artwork and obviously on this game and I know are you interested or are you considering maybe jumping back into creating more in the world as a book series like sequels like with like Tamar's Offspring or going into the future or expanding this is related to a couple people's questions like Civil War era or just like incorporating like seeing how like the Industrial Revolution would have affected dragons and such.
To be honest, right now I am in a massive like million word project, which I'm about halfway through, which is aptly called Folly. And uh and so I am deeply committed to that in terms of writing. I feel like, the thing about Temeraire is that I feel like to me, it's really important to finish a story. I feel like a story, a narrative should have an end. But one of my ambitions as a writer is that when the story ends, my ideal is that the reader comes away from it with the sense that the page ends, the characters keep going, the world keeps going and keeps existing, and you sort of can immediately kind of envision things that might be happening. Um, and I That's part of why I was so interested in the idea of a role-playing game, right? In that what I really would like for Temeraire, what I kind of want for Temeraire is to hear your stories, right? I want other people to tell me stories about Temeraire. I feel like I had this big sort of, uh, operatic narrative that spanned all these continents, the Napoleonic Wars, um, and and obviously history never ends, and so the universe still goes. Um, but I don't know that I have another story like that in me right now. And I've written a lot of sort of almost fanficky type stories in the Temeraire universe as well. Um, and I feel like there's a lot there's a lot of material there for other people to tell stories about Temeraire in. Um, and and I want people to tell those stories. I want other people to you do some of the work for me. You know, like tell the stories, right? And that to my mind is part of what a great RPG um, does is it facilitates it gives you the framework like to help you tell your own stories collaboratively in this way. And I feel like there's a special magic in that. That is not the same as the pleasure of reading a novel, right? So it's not but you know what? There's 9 books. There's 9 books. And so I feel like it's a great idea to have a different kind of pleasure in the universe as well.
Yeah, it's well put. I'm always joking, like when campaign RPG campaigns ends, we have stars and wishes. I'm always like, my wish is like more sessions, but eventually it does have to like end and all that. But then will there be chances, Brendan, for like in future supplements? Obviously, with this main Kickstarter, we have the main core book and then the one setting one. But in theory, in future ones, will there be a chance to explore beyond the Napoleonic War, see what life is after that, or expand further into that?
So it's always the case that, we want to work with Naomi and make sure what we're doing matches what she would want and matches the property. And like it's always the case that if people are really clamoring for something, if we see space there, then we'd want to talk about it. So we never want to say absolutely not, but we also want to be careful here, especially because for everything that Naomi just said, like this is a place and dragons were sort of built into this place for this particular story and it all fits together really well and you can imagine this world continuing, but it raises all kinds of new questions. Those questions are interesting to grapple with, but in some ways maybe the fun part would be for people to grapple with some of those questions themselves. We're trying to create a useful and framework to align a structure so you can do your own stories here. Like I think about some of the things that Naomi has said in interviews, if for instance dragons are not jet fighters, and this is one of the settings in which they can really have a significant influence on battle, but also are not so overwhelming that they just rewrite all of the rules. And like, so they can play a significant role, but without being overpowering. And it's difficult to have that in other time periods as technology changes and as things change. So all of it is something we would talk about, but there are lots of challenges with it. And there is, as this entire conversation has elucidated, there's so much to explore just in this world. It's a world, like it's a planet. And this story does ultimately have tendrils spreading everywhere across the entire globe. There's so much to explore just in these years. We would probably want to explore a lot of that first and foremost.
No. I mean, I will say, look, I put Lawrence and Temeraire literally in space. Well, it's like you can do it. And the thing is that I super encourage people to do it. But I do feel like the to me, the goal of I do think the Napoleonic War era worked really well to have these kinds of dragons in it. Um, and and I feel like um, I super would encourage somebody to come up with their own answers for what it would be like, in the Civil War, in World War One, right? Um, and what dragons would be doing, right? In a situation like that, what the Temeraire dragons would be doing. But I did actively like design them
Right.
for this era of warfare in the series. Um, because what I liked about it was that balance, right? That it's immediately sort of obvious why a dragon is both threatened by a cannon, but can also menace a cavalry unit, right? And an infantry unit and a ship. Um, So there is the same way as there is between the characters, right? Between dragons and people, they can both be people. They can both be fully realized characters in this universe, in this era. And yeah.
For the record, my fan fiction version is I want to see the dragons in like Condottieri era Italy, and like with Borgias and Medici's, and that's what I want. But
I mean,
That'd be a
I
lot of
have a lot of
matchmaking
fun
there.
writing them into ancient Rome.
yes, the Mark Antony story is great.
Yeah. And I do appreciate that, like, you're definitely one of those authors who like want to play with, like, have your characters be played with by other people, so that's always fun. Like, fan fiction is in the zeitgeist right now for various reasons, and all that. And it's always appreciative. And I think I've noticed, especially with the games that Magpie has licensed and everything, like fans are always afraid to stick, or not, they're afraid to go out of canon. So I think that's why these questions come up a lot. Like, they want to have like hard set rules or hard set lore, like, hey, I can point to this, because they're afraid to like have their own interpretation. So I think it's good to like let people know, like, you can have your interpretation. Just because it's not posited in the book doesn't mean it can't happen. But will there be like anything, Brendan, to like help GMs and players like nurture that extra creativity? You guys did it well, like in Masks and in Urban Shadows, I feel like, and especially in Avatar, to like help, like, hey, just because it's these eras, you can do other eras. Like, you don't have to stay here. So is there something like that you're hoping to have as guidance?
So crucially here, we're focused on this particular setting, but also we're focused on thematic elements. We're focused on aspects of the kind of conflicts that are going to come up. And theoretically, those thematic elements and concepts could be mixed up in time, and you could change exactly when they're showing up. Elements of duty and desire are not unique to the Napoleonic era. They absolutely show up all over the place. So there's a component there of thinking about how the actual themes and tone of what we're playing with could show up in other places. That's one of the key things I could imagine being useful to transposing it to a different time period. But I would also say, like, one of the key things, and I'm also very much interested in what Naomi has to say about this because of your own work with fan fiction culture and how there is, to me, there seems like this overlap of doing an RPG in a setting is incorporating that setting into yourself and processing that setting and somewhat responding to it or adjusting it. And that means you both have to invent upon it, but you feel bound to it. Like a little bit what you said, Diana. You might be scared to break out of canon, and even ignoring just the Temeraire series itself. I was watching the video that just came out recently from the History Buff YouTube channel talking about the Napoleon movie with Ridley Scott's Napoleon movie, and how like it's a really clear example of how Napoleon is one of the most documented historical figures ever. And there is a lot of constraint around historicity and trying to actually represent the truth of Napoleon, and such that if you really run outside of that, you can maybe possibly run your movie into a landmine and make a mess of it. But outside of that, it can feel scary for a gamer to be like, I have to know everything about the Napoleonic Wars in order to be able to do this. I have to know the countries involved. I have to know the battle plans. I have to know the name of every one of Napoleon's marshals. I'm never going to be able to do this. And it can be terrifying because it can feel like you're bound. All of that stuff is true, quote unquote. But I mean, from our perspective, we very much are like, do what you need to do for your setting. It's not true and it's not necessary. And the canon is there to give you strength, not to ruin you or break you or chain you. But I'm curious for you, Naomi, especially picking the Napoleonic era for the series. Like, how did you feel about all of this?
I mean, look, I'm the kind of nerd. Sorry, I'm just like I have some of these books here like that I brought.
Yeah.
This is I love this book. It's such a great book. A military history and atlas of the Napoleonic Wars. And it shows you like the
Love it.
maps for every single battle. There's like 3 days of maps showing like where they maneuver. It's so great. It's so um, but this is literally what I do for fun, right? For fun, I read history, I read nonfiction. Um, and um, and that said, uh, like when I'm writing, I'm not looking up every detail, in fact, for the most part, I am going on a kind of intuitive sense built over the course of having read, at least 100 books on the Napoleonic era. Um, and uh, most of which I've forgotten, the vast majority of. Um, and, the thing that I kind of urge people to remember about fiction is it is all made up, right? The Temeraire books, I made them up. I made them up. And yes, I used history a lot. Um, and I liked and I researched the details. Um, in no small part because that's the technique that helps the dragons feel believable, right? Because when I'm accurately representing the technology that they have in the era, the construction of the ships, what kinds of materials they had. Um, these are these are sort of like touch points, anchors, right? That help you as a reader be like, oh, here's where I am. I'm really in this era. And then I'm like, and here's a dragon. And you're like, right, sure, there's a dragon. But there were no dragons. I'm just saying there were not in fact dragons in the Napoleonic Wars. Um, and so what is the value of canon, right? The value of canon to a fandom, right, is a shared place to stand. Um, and if there's a detail, um, either in history or in the books that that you don't know, uh, or that if you're trying to play the game, the value is that you and the player on the like you're the GM, all your players, you kind of have something that you're like, this is our shared kind of Bible, this is our shared reference. Um, and then within that, you as a group can decide like what level of detail do we want to care about? What are we gonna like bother looking up? If you're like, for instance, with etiquette, right? If you're like at a dinner, um, and you're like, wait, would they have would they use this spoon for this course? Like, what's the order of the courses? You don't actually have to go look that up. As a GM, you can just be this character happens to have been raised in the British aristocracy, and just knows the answer and is correctly using the correct silverware. You don't need to worry about it, right? Um, and if, for instance, it's with dragons, to some extent, you can be like, I'm going to make up how a dragon would react to this. And decide with your fellow players whether that feels true, right? There's certain core pieces. A dragon is not going to leave an egg, right? A dragon, like if you're a dragon and you've had an egg, you're like, oh my God, like super important. And dragons want status, right? They're pretty hierarchical. And so, you can find some that are kind of not playing the game, but to some extent they're still kind of playing the game a little bit, like Presidia, right? She's like, well, I
Right.
can't. She's just sort of like she doesn't like the game because she feels like she's not doing well in the game. But as soon as she finds a way to like play for status, she's like, ooh, right? Then she cares about status. So there are these core touch points about dragons and humans. Like similarly, if you were like, well, I as a human being am going to grow wings and fly next to the dragon, everybody's gonna be like, but you can't do that, right? But of course, there could absolutely be a fantasy universe in which that's a perfectly
Sure.
right. Um, so it's about having shared having a shared place, having a shared sandbox to play in.
Yeah. The idea of the shared place to stand from really resonates. I believe it was Whistler for our company who did Rapscallion, the game about fantasy piracy, who use the term we want to empower GMs to speak confidently. And I hear you, Naomi, use the term intuition. And it's like that's our goal. We want to make sure you running the game have the confidence and the intuition to be like, you know what? This is the answer, and I'm just going to go with it. And we don't need to look it up. We don't need to stop what we're doing. We don't need to bring everything to a grinding halt. I know enough because I know the core principles, and I'm going to make a call in the moment and I feel authoritative in this moment, and that's fine. And we can just move on and build on that. And that's the goal, to give you that level of intuition and confidence. And so, with regard to any of these adaptations as well, giving you the ability to be like, okay, I feel confident in what I'm doing with. We have this shared thing that we're standing on, and I understand it enough that I can extrapolate it out over here. And when you see the way that I extrapolated it, you might be like, I wouldn't have done exactly that, but yeah, I see it. I get it. That's fine. Great. Awesome. It worked for you and you're confident, and it was the right intuition for you. So I mean, I would also just call out, like, for anybody who's saying I'm a new GM or I'm new to this and I don't know all of those details. Like, again, our job, what we're going to do with this book is give you that confidence, give you that shared place to stand from. Do what Naomi just did and be like, this is what dragons generally care about. Know that there are always exceptions, because there are always exceptions. And a lot of the time, the exceptions are where we want to focus our story. And like, we want to give you those tools to have that confidence yourself.
And also, I would add to give you the chance to consciously choose something else,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I do believe in, I really fundamentally believe that like there's uh, one of the key pieces is it's fine, it's good to break rules
Hmm.
for the sake of having a great game.
Hmm.
Um, you know, as long as you kind of understand what the rules are doing and what the function of them is. And I think, obviously so in terms of like the Napoleonic Wars and the dragons and the things the dragons can do,
Hmm.
right? So there's a reason why dragons can I've given dragons certain behaviors, or given dragons certain kinds of abilities and not others, right? Why we do have fire breathers.
Right.
We don't have dragons the size of Ancalagon the Black, right? These are two, that's not like obvious, right? They're surprisingly, there is a work of fiction with a dragon as big as Caligon the Black. I'm just saying, um, who's from Tolkien for anyone who doesn't know. Um, and it's the thing is, but there's no reason why you couldn't have, like, I'm going to have an absolutely gargantuan dragon, bigger than all the other dragons in the world. It's going to be absolutely monstrous. As long as you understand that the reason that the dragons are kept within their current size limits is for their balancing qualities in terms of the war, right? And if you know that that's why, then that empowers you to kind of be like, think about, okay, so how is this dragon going to throw off the balance of my game before you actually just go ahead and let your player like make Ancalagon the Black, you know? Right.
Makes notes for mission about giant super weapon dragon.
Exactly. We only have a few more minutes left, and appreciate you taking your time out of your schedule for us, Naomi, and for you, Brendan, too. As the Kickstarter is going and running, so a couple of more fun questions. I know we didn't get to everything that was asked, but we got through majority of it. Other questions can be asked on the Kickstarter regarding actual stuff about the RPG at the Kickstarter. Kate and others will happily answer whatever is able to answer. But Naomi, would you be playing a human or a dragon? And what type of human or dragon would you be playing if you got a chance to RP with? your own game.
I mean, I'm already. I'm the GM. I'm sorry.
So you're
No.
playing all of them.
Yeah, I feel like I've already like put some friends on notice that we're all going to be having a Temeraire RPG game and game.
Nice.
Um, but but what would I play? I feel like, I think it would be kind of, now I'm really interested in this idea of the quartermaster dragon that we were talking about. I'm like, I like the idea of the quartermaster dragon, like subtly sort of like making a power play inside their formation. Yeah, I like that idea.
I love it.
Awesome. Yeah. What about you, Brendan?
I mean, I get to cheat too. 'Cause
True.
so the thing for me that's strange is that like I get a little bit of that joy of designing the quick start characters, for example, and being like, oh, these are all exciting. What would excite me to play? Who am I interested in here? So like at some level, those quick start characters nearly always include characters that I kind of want to play or that I would want to be. Uh, so like there's a part of me that says that it's a cheat, but there's a part of me that says like I really like Constance in the quick start. I really like that character. I Look, I have my foibles and I have my weaknesses, and it gave me a little squeal of glee to say that the dragon's name was Parador and have Naomi be like, oh, "That's good," and I'm like, "Yes, that makes me so happy to have this little Percival Arthurian dragon in there." Makes my little heart run around in circles with glee. Uh, I mean, I think that I would probably tend, knowing the kind of character that I play, to be like that kind of sadder, more veteran captain kind of character. Like I've been through it. I'm still doing it because it's still got to be done. But I'm not sure how much I want to be here. I'm not sure how much longer I've got left in me. And then, of course, the story is about you've got tons left in you and stuff like that.
Excellent. Is there, since we did hit the first stretch goal, Brendan, are you able to tease out like what we can look forward to as the numbers go up, as the dragons, gain their horde and everything?
Lots of good stuff. So much good stuff. Uh, I can share. So the very next stretch goal that we're looking at is the Russian Empire setting options, and we're going to look at expanding all of these in many different fronts. So like we want to bring these different places in, and this is a way for us to say like if we hit these stretch goals, it helps us to say allocating more pages to the book so that the book costs more and it costs more to ship and everything else. Like it's now worth it. We know it's worth it. Your interest and your support is the key to make it available to us to really add these extra pages. So like in that particular case, that's us making sure this place is covered and we have new things for you to do with this place and for players to play within this space. So we're going to be adding more of those player options. We're going to be adding more of those settings over the course of the campaign. We have a couple more really cool physical upgrades that are going to be coming so that the actual stuff that you're getting is even cooler. And we have a couple of missions, I believe, on deck somewhere in there of like exciting stories for you to play out where kind of like the quick start, we're going to be trying to provide some of those tools. So, but I think those are way down the line.
Awesome. Naomi, anything you're extremely excited for regarding like the Kickstarter and getting this out for everybody to play?
I mean, I'm just super happy that people are excited and interested, and really grateful to you all for, being willing to fly off with Temeraire. And I think I mean, I just want the rule book. I want to want to fly. Yeah, that's it for me. The rules, the
Excellent.
system.
Yeah. I think we'll leave it that there. Thank you everybody for coming along. We're gonna show the Kickstarter trailer one more time. If you haven't backed, you still have plenty of time to back. But just as Brendan said, if you back in the first 60 hours, you get a free. You have to back at a physical tier level, mind you, to get the free cloth map. If you're only backing the digital level, that means you're not getting anything shipped. So we can't ship you a cloth map if you're only getting digital. So that is the one little bit of caveat. It has to be physical level within the first 60 hours, which I think is a very generous time. Thank you everybody for coming along and geeking out with us about dragons and quartermasters and everything. And we'll see you around. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Well, so much.